Well, it depends what sort of sanctions they're planning to put. I mean, you can put sanctions on Gaddafi himself and his family. For example, you can stop masonries coming and being flown into the country. You know, you can bar him from using his aircrafts against the people. There's so many measures. You know, for example, the step they took now, which is freezing all his assets. You know, personal assets or his money abroad, where he can't use to pay masonries or pay aircrafts to bring them over. Things like that. You know, if they put measures aimed at him and his you know, his followers or his fighters or his relatives, you know, that will help the Libyans, obviously, you know. But if it's put just a blanket sanction on the whole country, of course, that will give him more strength, because he has the reserve, everything is underneath him, so he will stay, you know, no shortage for him and his army and his militia. And the people will be suffering, obviously, out of hunger and out of disease and stuff like that. So I think the international community is intelligent enough by now and experienced enough by now in so many conflicts in the world, where they can aim their sanctions on him and his government and his, you know, his army and his militia, and let the people prosper and be stronger. I mean, for example, you know, we've seen before where they used to throw food from aircrafts to people, refugees, and people are displaced because of wars or because of conflicts. You know, there are so many measures the community knows. I mean, the NGOs also are experienced. You know, if they wanted, I mean, for example, in Britain now already on a personal level, the Libyans they had a big meeting for all doctors who work here. You know, because of the situation of Libya. Years and years, there are so many doctors who are practicing in Europe. You know, they had a big meeting, and they managed with Al-Wafa relief agency, which has just been established, and they managed to collect £60,000 to buy medicine and take to Libya. So these things need to be explored. These things need to be helped. These things need to be given a push. You know, and that way. I mean, what's stopping the international community, who are on the side of the Libyan people, to withdraw their ambassadors from Libya, for example? There are so many things which you can do which will paralyze Gaddafi's regime, but at the same time help the Libyan people in their uprising.
Abdul in Benghazi, if I could turn back to you on this. I know you're in the eastern part of the country, and information coming out of the west is still pretty hard to come by at the moment, but presumably it's much worse for them than where you are. What are some of the accounts that you've heard?
I've heard of complete massacres that have taken place over there in Tripoli, and the situation has gotten really, really bad. I have friends over there and relatives who have spoken to me, and they've told me that they get shot at each time they leave their homes. So they can't even leave their homes to get food or water or anything else from the outside world. People are literally prisoners in their homes over there, and those who do leave are at risk of being killed at any moment. The situation is very, very quickly deteriorating, and things are getting very bad over there.
Osama Mustafa, tell us a little bit more about what you know as far as the potential refugee situation along the border between Egypt and Libya. We've heard lots of stories of people streaming out of the country. There's an urgent need to provide basic materials for them as well, isn't there?
Yeah, that is correct. We've been witnessing since we've been at the border that there's been a lot of different of the various laborers that have been working in Libya that have fled the country, from the Egyptians to the Filipinos and the Vietnamese and many of even the Ghanese people that were innocent employees that were working for the various companies. Most of them have been stranded at the border with no monies and no way to get out of the country. Even many of them don't have the proper paperwork from the Palestinian refugees that cannot leave and enter into Egypt. And we think there will be a lot of aid that needs to be delivered to those people there to make sure that they're taken care of.
And presumably that's putting a strain on resources in Egypt potentially, because you are, of course, in a country that's dealing with its own transition to democracy, and also still trying to get back to some sort of semblance of normal life there.
Correct. I think this is a very difficult time for, I mean, like you said, the Egyptian government. I mean, it's too many people coming across the border and putting a strain on them. And that's where I think the international community could step in and help out with many of these refugees that are popping up at the border that need to be helped and given ways out of the country and to be supported and helped, at least to get them back to their home countries where they have their networks and could be back safely and live happily.
I'm interested to know as well on a personal level from you, since you are in Egypt, what kind of a response have you been getting from ordinary Egyptians, for example, about the plight of people in Libya, given that they've been through their own struggle there and are continuing to struggle for some sort of a government that represents them?
Sure. I will tell you the truthfulness is that we arrived here on Monday, and since Monday of early last week, we have been supportive by all of the Egyptian people that we've told them what we're trying to do. We've been helped from acquiring the medication very quickly to the transport to the border. The people even at the border have been very, very helpful to us to ensure that our aid got across, and also the many doctors that we've organized. And they've all been supportive and helpful to, and going above and beyond what they had to do to make sure that the aid got into Libya. And we've seen so much outpouring of donations from the various Egyptian people, from simple things of people even just offering us a few Egyptian pounds just to add to our convoy to buy more medicine, to even bring us supplies and various things that we needed to have happen.
Abu Bakr, what about the potential? Let's just turn back to politics just for a moment here, because that is also front and center in terms of what's happening inside Libya. But what about the prospect of a potential power vacuum should Gaddafi's regime eventually be toppled? Is that something that you fear?
That is the least worry at the moment. I don't fear it at all. I think once people took power or freedom in their...
Sorry to interrupt, but people right now are united in their opposition to Gaddafi. Once, and if Gaddafi is removed, what do you think will happen after that?
I think what people want, my sense of the situation, they want to choose, they want free elections to choose their representatives. No more of, one man rule or one party rule. They want freedom of choice, like everywhere in the world. This has proven practically, theoretically, everywhere in the world. The countries which have freedom of choice would have one vote each, and, people are allowed to campaign freely, and show their programs and their intentions. People vote for them and try them if this is a system which everybody wants nowadays. There is no fear of vacuum. There is no fear of having a radical or whatever, fundamentalist group come and take over, because people will not allow that. People have suffered 42 years. The Libyans have seen what many, many nations have not seen. We've been crying loud, saying we have not just a brutal dictator, a crazy dictator. Nobody believed us. Everybody thought we were exaggerating. But now you see it practically in front of your eyes. So really, the Libyans, I think, will be the most sensible and the most accurate, choosing the system which allows them to be free and not oppressed again. They'll be very, very cautious, believe me. Also, from this terrible experience of Gaddafi, 42 years, many of the Libyans fled and lived in so many places, educated themselves, saw so many things which they wouldn't have learned in their own country. All these people, I think always once Gaddafi goes, we come back, you're going to have so many versions of Libyans, because we're married to Europeans, Asians, children from half Libyan, half Asian, half European. So I think Libya is going to prosper. I think Libya, the only obstacle in front of Libya is Gaddafi and his children.
And when you say that the international community, people outside of Libya, are seeing the true colors of Gaddafi's regime right now, does that suggest that they spent too much time cozying up to him?
Too much time? What cozying?
Yeah. Do you think that the international community spent too much time making friendly deals with Colonel Gaddafi and his leadership?
Well, that is one aspect, talking about states and governments. But even when we used to talk, I mean, I left the country in 1986 and I've been living in Britain since that time as a refugee. But when you talk your own experience about Gaddafi and what he is and what he does, people think you're exaggerating because you don't like him, you know. Maybe, yes, a percentage of it is truth, but not the whole picture, you know. But now everybody can see it, you know, with his own eyes. You know, a man who stands up and says, either I rule you or kill you. Clear as that, in front of everybody, in front of the whole world, in front of the whole media, with all the sophisticated communication methods we have, like internet, Facebook, and all these things. He's saying it, he's not afraid, he's not ashamed, he doesn't care. So, you know, this is the man we've been describing to you verbally, you know, and maybe you didn't know about it. Here he is.
All right, just briefly, Osama, if I could turn to you for the last word. Do you, are you hopeful for the future for Libya at the moment? Do you think that things will eventually get better?
I do, very much. I mean, I believe that the Libyan community worldwide have come together in this time of need, and I think we will continue to move forward in seeing our country move to a better state, and I think it will happen in our lifetime, and very shortly.
But do you think that things perhaps might get better before things might get worse before they get better?
I think we might see something coming soon, a little bit worse, but we will, as the Libyan people, we will overcome this and we will be victorious in establishing the first free Libya after 42 years being ruled by a dictator, and we will have our first free elections and be a united country once again.
All right, well, we will be certainly following all the developments inside and outside Libya here on Al Jazeera. But we want to thank all of our guests for taking part in the discussion. Osama Mustafa in Cairo, Abu Bakr Direis in London, and our guest on the phone, Abdul from Benghazi. Many thanks for your time. And thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. As always, we welcome your comments, your opinions, suggestions. You can email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Bye for now.
Behind the harsh reality of headline stories, creative forces are constantly developing. Across the globe, people use their talents, their imagination, and their vision to break down powerful barriers. From a small backroom theater challenging a despotic regime, to the courage of individuals searching for expression. With rich colors and clear voices, people communicate to a wider world. Artscape, coming soon on Al Jazeera.
If you're a Nokia user, you can download Al Jazeera's news widget from Nokia's Ovis store. The news widget, available on compatible Nokia devices, gives users quick and easy access to real-time news updates from Al Jazeera English. See the world in real time. Al Jazeera Mobile.
As protests, violence, and the call for political reform spreads across the Arab world, Al Jazeera's in-depth coverage of events on the ground brings you the news as it breaks. Ongoing coverage of the Libya uprising on Al Jazeera.
Information travels in many ways. Knowledge passes in an instant.
If you want to communicate with those shaping the headlines, this is your chance to ask questions directly to the people making the news. Riz Khan, at this time on Al Jazeera.
The lives that go unnoticed. The reality of addiction. The truth that is ignored. Stories of inspiration. 101 East brings you the lives of the people of Asia and how their stories shape the future of the region. 101 East, at this time on Al Jazeera.
Homes have crumbled and many buildings have been left just empty shells.
Tensions are high. Riot police trying to control thousands of Greek protesters on the streets of Athens.
A British court has approved the go-ahead for WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange to be extradited.
Gaddafi is waging a war against the Libyan people. They are killing civilians mercilessly. They're using ammunition, live ammunition.